Hello and welcome back to Downloadable Content. Recently, the Blade and Sorcery team dropped its official roadmap. Finally, we get to see what will be on 1.0. We will see the future of what's coming, and unfortunately, we will also see what has been cut. At the very end, I will give you my opinions on such, but let's go ahead and dive right into the news. Now, this roadmap update comes directly from the Blade and Sorcery Discord, with the main developer Cosby listing all these things to come. So first and foremost, of course, is the Crystal Hunt mode, which is the progression mode update. If you guys didn't know, earlier this year in February 28th, the Baron dropped the Crystal Hunt preview. He showed us a lot of what's going to be in the environments, and the new dungeon itself looks absolutely fantastic. The biome is totally different than what we currently have, and I'm sure everyone is super excited to play on these and explore till their heart's content. And some of the maps outside of the dungeon also got a fresh coat of paint and things added. You can see that little star off in the distance on the arena and some of the other maps. They also did the Crystal Hunt skills preview, and this was the biggest information we had for a while. It gave us a lot of new skills that are going to be coming in the 1.0 update. Everything from new magic and weapons to unarmed combat. Things are looking very, very cool for the player. There are so many combinations of different things to do that it just got me so excited, and I cannot wait, just like I'm sure all of you can't wait, to get your hands on 1.0 and just go through the dungeons and unlock all of these amazing skills, like this Flamethrower. Now, the next thing on the list is the Dalgarian Dungeon, and as we took a look at already, the Dalgarian Dungeons look as such. Overgrown ruins, it looks really inviting. It's like a cave system that does have some opening, so it does have some inspiration from like Skyrim and other games like that, maybe even like Lord of the Rings, but they've done their own thing. It doesn't look like you're just lost in a spooky cave, which I appreciate. So this environment looks so cool. We don't need to keep talking about it. I just want to let you know that they look fantastic. Up next is the Buying Weapons and Armors, aka the shop. Now, going back to previous news, they listed the shop and people thought it would be some kind of UI or book, but no, it's actually a physical shop that the player can go to. I mean, we actually see what looks like a player here, possibly even an NPC with things to buy. And they even list a possible unexpected cosmetic twist. So we'll see what they have, maybe different like armors or something there, which would be pretty cool. We still don't know what to expect from the shop because a lot of players want to be able to loot from the shop and fight off guards and what have you, but we'll see what happens with that shop. It's just really cool that's going to be in the progression game mode where, yes, you're earning different crystals and you can find loot in the dungeons, but you can also take maybe your quote-unquote currency, visit the shop and buy potions, buy a new shield, buy new armor sets, and that is what's going to be really cool and feel more of a game. Then of course we have the skill tree, and we just talked a little bit about this one, but the skill trees looks fantastic. Of course, it's more than just magic. There's like the mind, body, and magic part of it. So everyone of course is super excited for the skill tree, and don't worry, outside of progression mode you will still have almost all of the skills that you can unlock for the sandbox mode, which is still really cool. So if you're just looking to mess around, which I love to do, or make content, you'll still have access to almost everything that you can have in the progressive game mode outside of it. Now we're going to combine two things, which is the dungeon loot and the lore. Now the lore itself isn't going to be told to you from like an announcer's point of view. Think more of like the Soulsborne series where you find things in world. Now, of course, the Soulsborne, they usually have NPCs that can talk to you, but think about it just that the environment is telling you the story. Like you go up to this like crazy statue here, and there might be some inscriptions on there, and those inscriptions will be in this little like cipher right here. So you can actually decode this one, and a lot of people already have decoded this stuff, but it's really cool that that's built into it. So there's going to be some lore hidden around that you get to decipher as a player. Then, of course, there is the loot, and this is very exciting. We can see from the little gift down over here that it's someone actually physically opening up what seems to be a chest or almost like a refrigerator of sorts and finding something in there that I assume you're going to be selling to the shop. So one hand washes the other, which is really cool. But maybe in some of this one you could also find other weapons possibly in here, which is it's really cool just that there's a loot mechanic in there. And don't forget, a lot of this stuff is opened up to modders in the future. So as other modders like Lyrium figures out how to make their own custom dungeons, having this other base game framework does so much much more. Remember, it doesn't stop with just the 1.0 update, because that just opens the gate for modders to do their own thing as well. Now, there's also new weapons and new armors that's going to be coming into 1.0. We can see down here with the new armors, the NPCs, what they're visually wearing gets an overhaul. So this looks like a combination of new leather armor with some more plate. The enemies are loaded at this point now. You're going to have to really get in there. And what I'm hoping is that these little armor slits have very good collision. So this guy's wearing like I forgot the name of it, that type of helmet, but it's completely closed. So I'm hoping like a little blade can really get in there for like a one shot. Of course, you can still imbue it with fire. You can see a mage in the back corner. He looks like he's wearing something new, which is really awesome. We're going to talk about this in a little bit. You're going to see that this guy is using a two-handed war sword right here, but he's wielding it in one hand. But this is an officer, so you hope that they fight a little bit better, but like I said, we're going to get into that in just a second, but I just want to call that out for right now. But just take a look down here. This is now a base game weapon. This almost looks like a Zweihander or a take on the Zweihander. I forgot the actual type of weapon, but we're getting tons of new stuff. We have a new halberd. Look at this crazy like crystal staff that is going to do the flamethrower. You have like an executioner's one-hand blade that doesn't have a stabby point. So I'm excited for all that base game stuff. Now, the final two things in the major update says final polishing and balancing and surprise features. Now, that is a lot to consider. Now, of course, the final polishing is going to have to be things like dropping of frame rate and what have you. So when you're doing these skills on both PC and Nomad and there's enemies nearby, of course, I don't want a base game spell to cause like major jittering. Like if a mod does that, I guess that's okay because I understand that it's a mod. But a base game spell, so you see this character is fusing like a fireball comet and throwing it out. There's no frame drops, which is excellent, but there's also no NPCs on screen. And you can also see here this little like pseudo black hole. It looks like it's performing really well. I'm very excited to use that. But the two things that worry me is this little crystal flamethrower right here with multiple enemies on screen, especially because there's fire effects, and this crazy electric tornado. Now, I can see Nomad blowing up almost instantaneously because of that one, but I hope that PC handles this one much better. But because the game is going to be officially in 1.0, meaning it's no longer in early access, Nomad theoretically shouldn't have those problems. So we're hoping that the final polish, of course there will still probably be bugs because this is a physics-based game, but the bugs I'm hoping is just physics-based jank. I want all spells and stuff to have great performance and what have you. And then, of course, as they talk about balancing, this is what actually worries me. I know I said I'd wait to the end to give you my opinion, but this is just going to be a slight opinion. Balancing is going to be very tricky in 1.0 because the player will always be overpowered. We know that to be completely true. However, these new skills I'm seeing, it doesn't seem like the NPCs actually stand a chance, especially because recently Baron announced that they are getting rid of the mana system, so you will always be able to cast your magic infinitely. Of course, there will be a charge up time, but if you're doing powerful spells that stun enemies and make them float, what's the chance that an NPC has? They already don't have a chance if you basically have a sword. So the balancing is going to be pretty interesting to see. I mean, casting a black hole in a room, no one's going to be able to stop you, especially because these basic sorcerers seem to be able to only cast things like a fireball or electric. I'm interested to see that if the sorcerer NPCs that you fight get access to some of these new spells. I do doubt it, but it would be cool to see one of them shoot like a black hole at the player. Moving on to the next category, is available now in the Nomad beta. I'm sure you guys know by now, but the scripting modding on Android platforms, Quest 2 and 3, is in beta. It's officially out, which means that you can download scripted mods, but you have to opt into it yourself. So that means that getting spells like Mystic Hands and a bunch of other ones that are available, but not available through the mod manager. And I know that can be confusing for a lot of people, especially for you younger folks if you don't have access to a laptop or kind of don't know what you're doing. But just know that it is possible, but you really aren't going to find scripted mods in the mod manager itself. Now, moving on, we have this maybe/maybe not, just ideas for now. And now this one hurts the most. I will have an interview with the developers coming out later next week where you'll be able to hear me and the developers talk about this stuff, but I wanted to cover this one right now. This was devastating. So reading that the two-handed weapon support for NPCs has been crossed out makes me super sad. They've also crossed out the new player customization options and facial expressions. Now, if you guys did not know, there were facial expressions that happened to the NPCs back in U9. There was different, of course, death animations, but they would kind of talk and their faces would change basically as they're taking damage. It was very visceral and was cool, but also note that this was pre-Nomad. Now, of course, we can cast aspersions and say Nomad took away from the PC VR version. However, some things just are what they are, and this would be a welcome change to come back, but of course we see that it is crossed out. Also, U9 gave us a lot of customizations for the player and the AI itself. So you were able to, look kind of different, change up a few things. It wasn't how U7 was, where you can make yourself like a Shrek monster by any means, but it does seem like we're going to be losing a lot of these customization features, which is unfortunate. But now let's talk about the two-handed weapon support for the NPCs. Going back to the screenshot, you can see that the officer is obviously using a two-handed sword and doing like an upward thrust, much like we know these NPCs do. So they did show that they're going to be using a type of two-handed one, but there's not going to be any animations linked to it. So I'm hoping that they can still pick up two-handed weapons, especially because once you've disarmed an enemy and then there's a weapon that they should be able to use lying down on the floor and they're just kind of standing there with their hands in the air, it's a little immersion breaking. So I'm hoping at the very least that they can pick up like a halberd or a bardiche or a two-handed longsword and still maybe use it in one hand. However, that might seem unlikely, but seeing this screenshot where the guy is still holding it gives me hope. However, though, they're not going to have animations for these two-handed weapons, which is devastating. And if you go on Reddit, you can see a post actually, or a response by the Baron, I should say, where he kind of talked about how they were trying some of that stuff, but they almost got it to work, but it was causing like too much visual jank, and they had to adjust the angle and the distance of how the enemies were swinging. But moreover, they also needed to have hired an animator specifically for this one, which is something they actually opted not to do, just because that would add a new workload on top of it. I'll give you my opinion on that at the end, but I just wanted to let you know what was happening for it. Moving on, they say that they are now feature locked, and they said for real this time, and 100% focusing on completing their very overloaded amount of planned features that they are still have left to complete. So that means sadly they cannot add any more scope to the project until the update arrives. But what they are looking for after 1.0 that's still on the list, surprisingly, is a PlayStation VR 2 release. They have crossed out any type of DLCs or major extensions, which, what does that mean? Does that mean there's going to be no more updates aside for quality of life updates for the game as they work on another project? That's what it seems like. And we read this next part as such. They say, it seems increasingly unlikely we could work on a major expansion for Blade and Sorcery. As you may have noticed, our current situation using Thunder Road, which is the base game framework, is that our update development times have increased. Yes, I have noticed that. So after 5 years of early access and so much evolution in the team, from a solo dev, which is awesome, all the way up to a full team, which is super cool, they realize that the framework is just completely slowing down their workflow. So as such, Warp Frog, which is the development studio, intends to move into their new framework, which is Thunder Road 2, for their next project. The new framework is much faster, scalable, and more specifically easier to use for both the devs, the artists, and modders alike. Our iteration time on the new framework is nothing like using Blade and Sorcery, so the good news is that any new project may come sooner than we expect. And then in closing, they say if they do ever want to return to the Blade and Sorcery universe in the future, maybe we would opt into a full-blown sequel using Thunder Road 2 instead of fiddling around with the first one, but no plans as of now though. But we will see. Now, that's all they put in this little roadmap right here. Cosby, if you guys didn't know, is the main developer, and he keeps tons of stuff close to his chest. He's someone that does not like to overpromise and underdeliver. However, he is being honest with what is about to happen, which I think as players we should strongly appreciate, regardless if there have been some things that have been cut. And they have been very open and honest with what is coming through in their Road 2 patches. I mean, if you just go into their Steam page and scroll all the way down, not only can you see 1.0 and all this news, you'll see the older updates. You'll see what's in their betas. You'll see like U7 U8, all this stuff. It's really cool to see the continuum of how they've created things. However, there are some stuff in here that we were hoping for that never came to fruition. But I am very excited for the Crystal Hunt and Progression game mode. Giving this one a high concept for the game is awesome. I will always love the sandbox, and I will always go in there and play to my heart's content and do just crazy stuff and make content. But it is really cool to have a quote-unquote game inside of this game, something that you can go in there every single day, work on your character, and grind it out. I think that is 10 out of 10. People are going to enjoy it on PC as well on Nomad. Having a new dungeon, the Dalgarian one, is cool. So not only can you do the Crystal Hunt mode and more than one dungeon, but jumping right in and having access to both, and they are quote unquote randomly generated, is going to give huge amount of longevity to this game. Plus, you're also going to have modders have access to this framework, which is really cool. They can add new skills if they want to. They can add new dungeons. This is going to be huge for the game, absolutely massive, especially because the game has some minor baked in lore that the players can discover, and as a community we could figure out together. And then we have the buying of weapons and armors, which is the shop. I think the concept of the shop is pretty cool. However, they may add some immersion breaking. And what I mean by that is that if there's a bunch of stuff in the shop and yes, you're the player, why can't you just basically steal everything? Why can't you just slaughter the shopkeeper a la Skyrim style and just loot stuff? And let's say if you have done that, they call the guards and you can either lose to the guards and it resets that progress, it doesn't save what you did, or you can defeat the guards and escape, but you can never return to that shop again. I think that would be cool unless you made a new character. Or let's say you get like a mind spell and you can erase the memories of certain things, aka remove your bounty. But this is just me adding a game concept. Don't get latched onto that. I don't think that's going to be a thing. I think the shop is just going to restrict you being able to do damage or loot anything. Now, things like skill trees, dungeon loot, and lore, we talked about it already. That's really cool. Of course, I'm super excited about skill trees. Having more skills, epic. I love that. 10 out of 10. Having baked in lore is so cool. New weapons, I'm always happy to see new weapons. The only thing though with these new weapons, they have talked about it before, is things like half sorting. I can see that there's a new grip point here, but they're not gripping the blade. And most of the stuff in Blade and Sorcery, if it's a sword, really can't be hand and a half or half swords. Of course, things like axes and polearms have a big handle where you can grab almost anywhere, but Cosby has said in the past that he doesn't like how the hand positions look when you're half sorting things, so I'm actually not expecting to see that in the game. So things like the two-handed longsword can only be grabbed from their grip points. Yes, new armors and polish we don't really need my opinion on, but this surprise feature is something I want to talk about because it says surprise feature and features. No, I don't think this is going to be co-op or multiplayer. That would be absolutely nuts. We'll leave that for a mod. But last time they talked about a surprise feature was actually back in U10. So in this U10 post, it has modding / the surprise. It says here that we think you guys have figured out the surprise already in the U10 trailer, and that is that they added a chicken into it, which was the surprise was a chicken, but it was supposed to mean so much more, because what that meant was there was going to be creature framework for modders and non-humanoid creatures into Blade and Sorcery. Now, what does that mean? I've been playing this game for a long time, and the non-humanoid things I've seen very few people were able to take a crack at. I've seen like a dog, a cat, and nothing was too great. I mean, the chicken by itself was just a chicken. It didn't really seem that like a lot of things came out to help modders create an actual non-humanoid thing like a spider or dragon. But now that they once again talk about the surprise features and features, I really think that it's possible that they're going to be adding maybe like a boss or a creature boss into these dungeons. Because once again, the surprise back from U10 was this creature framework. So I wouldn't be crazy to think that we're going to see that. And hopefully if they do that, they actually give modders what they need in order to properly create creatures. Because I know it was convoluted back then, so I'm hoping that it's going to be better in the future. And my final opinion, I don't know if it's going to be a hot take or not, but I will leave it as such. But Blade and Sorcery has been out in early access since I believe mid or late 2018, playing U6, and even before there was access to U5 and whatnot, even U4 if you were like a super secret person. But within that time, we have basically been fighting the same type of NPCs. Yes, there has been an archer. Yes, there's been a sorcerer, and there's someone with a shield and an axe. That's been cool, right? But eventually you memorize all of their attack patterns, and there really isn't that many of them. Not to mention that the AI really isn't capable of doing much. I mean, they will trip over their own friends and drop their weapons mid-combat. And of course, if you grab them, they go into, well, a doomed-like state where you can pretty much just do anything you want to them and they won't even fight back, even if they have a free hand. Now, seeing things like the two-handed weapon support for the NPCs has been crossed out, it gives me a thought that possibly other animations have been canceled. And now let me tell you about something. Back in 2021, on a Sunday in October, they made a post about the U10 Dungeons update now being available. This was one of the biggest updates we had ever gotten to Blade and Sorcery. Not only did it bring the dungeons and a bunch of stuff, but it also opened up a brand new game called Blade and Sorcery Nomad, which was only working on the standalone, which was cool. Blade and Sorcery on the go if you had a Quest or a Pico. Who wouldn't be excited? However, this is where some players think that a fork in the road was split and that the talent of the dev team went in two separate directions. But they gave us things like patrolling AI in the dungeon where you can kind of do some stealthing. It was really cool. However, you did notice a change in things like graphical fidelity, especially on the characters. If you look at the player's hand, well, kind of looks like Play-Doh, which was actually a big change from what they showed in actually the U9 update, where they added things like character decals and upgraded textures on not only the player models but the NPC models. But I digress there. There is one major thing I wanted to bring up. In this U10 update, they mentioned things like new animations. While still not the quote-unquote animation overhaul we mentioned before, NPCs have been addressed to stop their behavior of them charging into you and have some better range finding abilities. So less waiting in the air, some new animations have been added, as well as some old ones removed. But you can see right here an NPC doing a flying Superman punch, like with like a little axe, and one doing a two-handed jumping swing from the air that you would be able to block. I don't know if you guys noticed this, but U11, especially in U12, you don't really find characters doing too much of animation overhauls anymore. Now, yes, a character may shield bash you to push you away or do like a two-handed stab attack. That's kind of cool, but why did they really need to get rid of some of these animations? I'm hoping that they will make a comeback in 1.0, but seeing things like the removal of two-handed that was potentially on a list of things to come kind of makes me worried that the NPCs may not get the animation overhaul that we have been waiting for, which I'm hoping isn't a misstep. I mean, it's going to be really cool for the players to have all these new skills and all these new things to experience, a new biome to discover, lore and character progression. But if you're still fighting the same NPCs that didn't really put up much of a challenge when you only had just a dagger, imagine what happens when you are able to cast an electric tornado or black hole. So I am hoping that somehow one of the surprise features is not only just things like a creature or a boss that can happen. I am hoping that we still get that animation overhaul that was talked about many of those updates ago. But there we have it, my friends. That is my discussion about the roadmap that has been released. Apparently this was up on Steam about a week or so ago and I missed it, but it was released as of today when I was recording this one on Discord, so I wanted to make sure I covered it. And also next week I will have another interview where I speak with the Baron, one of the developers of Blade and Sorcery, where we'll talk about what's going on with 1.0, the road to it, possibly a release date and what have you. So keep an eye out for that one. I'm hoping to record that one Tuesday of next week, and I will probably have that out the following Wednesday if time permits. But other than that, I want to thank you guys so much for stopping by and watching and listening to these videos. It means a lot to me. If you're new to downloadable content, go ahead and subscribe. It's free. The button is right there to do so. But other than that, I am Drifter from Downloadable Content. Thank you so much for stopping by, and I will see you next time.